The Sine Institute of Policy and Politics is American University's incubator for policy innovation. We convene leaders in the academic, public, private, nonprofit, and journalism sectors to engage and promote common ground and nonpartisan solutions. In an evolving world, we seize the opportunity to work on the nation's most pressing challenges through collaboration by experts and top scholars in their field with students in research and scholarship. As part of that goal, the Sine Institute leverages American University's location in our nation's capital, the nexus of government and a growing international business center. We connect diverse perspectives from around the country and around the world with our world-class academics and research, experienced practitioners, and the most politically active student body in the U.S. We stand apart through our focus on the role of business and the nonprofit community in public policy, the rise of the importance of economic regions in the United States, and international policy issues. Our focus is to make an immediate impact at the intersection of policy and politics that leads to real and lasting change. Thank you for joining us as we convene, communicate, and collaborate. Introducing Sine Institute Fellow 2022, Julián Castro.
Hello, good afternoon, everybody. Good morning, depending on where you're at. I want to welcome you to the third session of our Sine Institute series on how policies across our country and elected officials are doing their best to serve the most vulnerable individuals and communities in our nation. And during the first two sessions, we had an opportunity to hear from Representative Mondaire Jones, and then most recently, Housing Secretary Marcia Fudge, which really gave us a perspective federally on what's happening. But today, I'm very pleased to welcome one of America's rising stars, a trailblazer, someone who is the mayor of the 8th largest city in the United States, in San Diego, in a growing community. That's Mayor Todd Gloria, to talk to us about some of the excellent work that San Diego is doing to serve the city's most vulnerable residents, how they're doing it, and also particularly how they're connecting the dots of opportunity and mobility, understanding that it's not just about housing or about transit or about economic development or education, but about all those things. And this should be a great conversation about how they're doing it. Now, Mayor Gloria is no stranger to public service. Before he was elected mayor in late 2020, he had served in the state legislature, and before that, on the San Diego City Council. He'd also been very active in a number of different capacities in San Diego, and I'm very pleased to welcome him today to the Sine Institute. Mayor Gloria, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for this opportunity, Mr. Secretary. It's great to be with you.
Definitely. You know, I want to talk about why you got interested in public service in a moment. But first, you got elected in the middle of the pandemic in late 2020. There aren't that many mayors of major cities that can say that. My first question is just like, how's it going?
Well, I would say I wouldn't recommend becoming mayor of a major American city during a pandemic. It's the Yelp review I would leave for that is pretty low. I
bet, yeah.
But you know, I think you probably would agree. You know, times like these need to be seen as an opportunity, right? To really stand in the breach to serve people who need to be served at a time when they really need their government to provide and help with the recovery, as well as an opportunity to maybe do things a bit differently. I think that's the nature of the conversation today, right? Is the opportunities to, to use the president's terminology, build back better, but certainly to see things as they've been in the past and say we're going to do it a bit differently. That's how I choose to try and look at it, because it is admittedly quite harsh. People, they're frustrated, they're anxious, they're angry, they're insecure, and they're looking for answers. And we do our best to provide those answers, but some of the information is changing. So the circumstances are changing. All that we can do is be available, be accessible, be authentic, and hope that you can enjoy the trust that we can get past this and get on to what I actually ran for, which are issues of housing, infrastructure, and climate action. But I've spent a whole lot of time on the pandemic, appropriately so. But I'm anxious to have folks get vaccinated, follow the public health guidance, and get back to working on climate, infrastructure, and housing.
Well, and San Diego, a lot of folks do realize, because, you know, San Diego is a prominent city. It's the second largest city in California, and countywide in San Diego County, I think y'all have something like 3.3 million people. You have almost 1.4 in the city itself. So it's also a growing community, a diverse community. I guess, talk to us a little bit about why you got interested in public service in the first place, and why local government specifically.
Delighted. First off, thanks for knowing all those stats about our city. You know, it's being this close to the second largest city in the United States. You know, sometimes there's, you know, there's a thing that's there. And I forgive most of the folks who are on the Zoom for maybe thinking San Francisco is the second largest city in California, but we are like literally double their size in terms of population. And just behind—
Don't worry, we have that same dynamic in San Antonio with Austin. People think Austin's bigger. It's not. It's not. And the tacos are no better either. So,
well, and we're just a hair behind San Antonio, right, in terms of, you know, seventh largest city, eighth largest city. Anyway, you know, I ran on a platform of saying we're a big city and we should embrace it. And then by doing so, we can solve some of the problems that we have historically experienced here, and then get to the bigger problems that, you know, because we sometimes may have a small town mentality that holds us back. To your question, you know, I'm born and raised here. I won the geographic lottery when I was born here. You mentioned being a trailblazer. You know, I'm the city's first person of color and LGBTQ mayor. And I'd share, people look at you like, what kind of last name is Gloria? And you look a little nondescript. I'm Native American, Filipino, Puerto Rican, and Dutch. And
yeah, you got it all.
I got it all. I feel comfortable in a lot of rooms.
Yeah.
But my grandparents came here because of the military. All right, so they came from all around the world, came here, and this is one of the most amazing places on the planet. And they chose to stay here when their service was complete. And so I'm a San Diego boy. I'm a hometown guy, and I just love my hometown. And my parents raised me to believe that if you care about something, you should leave it better than you found it. They were a maid and a gardener. This was not a public service commandment, but that's really how I interpreted it. You know, I feel fortunate to have been born here, and I've chosen to be involved in my community as far back as I can remember. Local politics was a calling because I had the opportunity to work at various levels of government, at the county, state, national, and now city level, and I like local government. I like the intimacy, the immediacy of what we do. What I did in the legislature, I just actually got back late last night from Sacramento. I have fond memories of my time in the state capitol, but there's nothing replacing the look, touch, and feel, the tactile nature of what we do in local government. You know, the proof is right there. Did you fill the pothole or did you not? Did you build the library? Is the park maintained or isn't it? Are the 911 calls being picked up or not? I get addicted to those kind of results. And while there's value in all levels of government, and everyone has an important role to play. We all have roles to play. I just find really an intoxicated nature of local government and the ability to just be directly in communication with your constituents every day. There's no hiding in the Capitol for days on end. You are here in the community. I can sign something at this desk at 2:00 in the afternoon and hear about it at the grocery store at 5 p.m. And actually, I think that's a good thing. I think it's good to get that feedback loop. It helps us to get better and to do better.
I mean, was for instance, when you went to college and so forth, was political science something that you studied, or topic related to what you do now? I mean, how early did you develop your interest in all of it?
Very early. While I think my sitting here is unexpected to myself and to many others, the truth of the matter is I was drawn into politics and government as far back as I can remember. My parents had very modest education, but they took the paper, and so I started reading the paper as a kid and then watching the news. And I was that nerdy kid that watched C-SPAN voluntarily, not because it was like what the teacher made us do that day. In the way my brother was really interested in sports and other things like that, I was just interested in politics. And as soon as I could convince my mom to give me a bus pass, I started volunteering on campaigns. Not because I ever envisioned being a candidate myself. And in fact, everything around me as a kid told me that this was not for me, right? That I could never put my name on the ballot. And if I did, I wasn't going to be successful. But I definitely wanted to help, candidates that inspired me. First candidate I volunteered for was Bill Clinton in his first race for president. And I just felt drawn to the need to be involved and try and help my community. And, what you kind of get attracted by the big name, right? But back to local government, when we were volunteering, doing phone banks and meeting city council candidates and the mayor and other folks, and realizing, wow, there's a world that's out there. And for a lot of folks that come from maybe modest means, I ended up being a staffer. And that's kind of what I thought I could be. And I don't know, Mr. Secretary, somewhere along the way, people said, you got to part in your hair and you can wear a suit and, you talk okay. And maybe you should consider this. And thankfully, the good people of the city, saw fit to give me that opportunity. Yes, acknowledging there's never been someone that quite looked or is like me in these offices, but it was those roots, right? I know that corner, I know that business, I've been, I went to school there, and that kind of credibility, really gave people a sense that, I knew what the neighborhood needed. And so they were willing to give me a chance to serve on the city council. And I like being mayor, but I tell you, being on the city council was a good gig. I really, really enjoyed that job. Probably of all the elected positions, I like that one the best.
Well, and I was remembering that you and I actually met, gosh, about a decade ago when I was mayor of San Antonio, and I went over to San Diego because a young candidate, super young candidate at that time, City Councilman David Alvarez, was running for mayor. He was in a runoff, and I went over to support him, and you were one of his supporters at that time. I think you were on the city council with him. And so your record of service, I mean, you've been at it for quite a while now. You mentioned, you alluded to this, but it took a lot of confidence for you to step up and pursue a career in public service to begin with. You are the first openly gay mayor the city has ever had. And unfortunately, it's still relatively rare among big cities. And I would imagine even rarer among small cities in our country. And you're the first person of color. Where do you think that you got that confidence from? That sense that, even though a lot of people on paper, they would look at your background and say, hey, that's probably not going to happen.
Yeah.
But you believed it and you did it. And I guess what advice would you have for some of the students who are here who I think draw inspiration from that?
Yeah, I appreciate you asking that, because opportunities like this, I get them every now and again, and I never want to miss the opportunity to really tell maybe some of the students that are here who, by virtue of the school you're attending, are interested in politics and public service. And that's good. I want you to stick with that. I see myself not just as the mayor of San Diego, but as sort of a missionary for public service. I think this is honorable work, and I want to recruit people to it. But the immediate advice is to not listen to that voice in your head that says that you can't. I certainly confess to having that voice even to this day for the work that I do, right? And what I've been grateful to have were great mentors who encouraged me to do things I didn't think I was capable of. And so don't listen to that voice of negativity. We're often our own worst enemy when it comes to really kind of getting outside of our comfort zone. Find a good mentor. In my case, I was so fortunate at the age of 14 to meet a woman named Susan Davis, who at the time was not elected to anything, but later went on to serve in the California legislature. I filled her seat years later, and then served on her staff when she was in Congress. And that's really who I learned the craft of public service from. And then the to your question about kind of what made you think you could do this, the truth is that other people paid significant prices to provide this opportunity for me. We had our first openly LGBTQ candidate run for office in San Diego in the late 1970s, a guy named Al Best. And Al actually did quite well. He came in the middle of that field, but he wasn't successful. In the process, he lost his job, had his home vandalized. He really paid a significant price. We had other folks who attempted unsuccessfully until 1993 when we elected our Harvey Milk here in San Diego, a woman named Christine Kehoe. And I, funnily enough, 1992, Bill Clinton runs for office. I met Christine Kehoe, and she ran in 1993. And guess what? I was there knocking doors, and it was just the opportunity. It's the personification, the living out of that phrase. If you haven't seen it, you can't be it. I was fortunate enough to have seen it. I saw Chris do this job, and while she caught hell for being the first, and of course, it was a very, very tough race. She went out and did what I tell people to this day. What's the gay agenda? Filling potholes, building affordable housing, taking care of neighborhoods. And so she, and then Tony Atkins after her, who's now our state Senate President pro tem, there are people who broke down those barriers and made it easier for me. And it was kind of one of those things where the community has made this investment. They have worked hard. Folks have sacrificed, lost jobs, lost elections to allow this opportunity. This is my contribution to forward progress. And what I have is an amazing group of staff who I can see a couple future council members and mayors just sitting outside this door. And my goal is to open the door and let them succeed beyond me. That will in many ways be the best reward for a career spent in public service.
So San Diego, when most people think about it, they think of the great weather that y'all have. I mean, I'm jealous, probably 80 something degrees most days over there. They think of this bustling California city. A lot of folks know it from the military. It has a huge military presence, a real deep investment from the federal government in military. But it's also a community like any other big city with deep challenges. And the focus of our sessions has been on the most vulnerable individuals and communities out there, especially after the 2 years of this pandemic that we've gone through. I mean, we know that everybody's been impacted by it, but the most vulnerable have been the hardest hit. I wanted to start off by asking you about your commitment and the city's commitment to providing housing for the unhoused. Recently, a program that y'all launched called Bridge to Home caught my eye, that is part of a even bigger agenda for housing that you have. What's that all about? And what are y'all trying to accomplish for folks that don't have a place to live?
Yeah, well, and I appreciate putting that question about our unsheltered population in the context of the last 2 years. I think we've all been through a lot. And I think as we sort of inventory the ways that our own personal lives have been impacted by the pandemic, sometimes we overlook what the most vulnerable amongst us has experienced. And you'd be hard pressed to find folks more impacted than our homeless population. And the best way I can explain it to you, social distancing for you and I may have meant that we stood 6 feet apart while we got our cup of coffee in the morning, right? For social distancing in a homeless context means that hundreds of shelter beds that the city has went unoccupied because we had to space people out. And so this situation that was already quite bad in San Diego and California, frankly, in a lot of big American cities and increasingly smaller cities, has made it infinitely worse. There are many other ways we can go on all morning about the ways the pandemic has made this worse. You can throw your hands up and just, surrender to it, or you can roll your sleeves up and get to work. And we're rolling our sleeves up and getting to work. And with regard to homelessness, I don't know about you, Mr. Secretary. I know you've worked in this issue as much as anybody in terms of housing, but homelessness is the most complex problem for which people want a simple solution. And there really isn't one. Each person's path to the street is unique to them, and it can be difficult from a policy perspective. When you make policy, in my case, for 1.4 million people, it's a one size fits all is often what you're dealing with. It's hard to kind of tailor solutions to individuals whose unsheltered status could be about divorce, job loss, mental illness, substance use, bad luck, whatever it is. It's a real challenge. That all is to say, if I had to give you a simple answer, it's housing. How do you end homelessness? It's housing. And we haven't been building nearly enough in San Diego, just period. That's a part of the reason why my parents, I mentioned before, a maid and a gardener, blue collar workers, not extremely well educated, were able to buy a home in San Diego 30 years ago because that was doable then. My brother and I are the first in our family to go to college. Neither of us own a home. It's not possible. It's not as possible for the working middle class of this city. And so that's an expression for what it means for the middle class of San Diego. Think about what that means for the folks who have the least and are the most vulnerable and the sickest. So for our unsheltered population, our Bridge to Home program is really about saying, what is the biggest bang for our buck that we can do to build the housing that ends people's homelessness? And so what we're doing is commingling local, state, and federal funds to build in our first round 662 new units of affordable housing. And Mr. Secretary, the thing I'm most excited about with this is that we are not talking about buildings that are solely for the homeless. These are mixed income communities. Stacking poverty onto a single block in this city would not be a good thing to do. But actually leveraging this opportunity to build more homes for people with no income, low income, and middle income, that's how you start driving change. That's how you actually see the interconnections. One of the things I fear is that as people are so frustrated, angry, and anxious, that they may take out their frustrations on the homeless, right? And we have to kind of see everyone as realizing that we're all in this together. And we all have a mutual responsibility to one another to drive change. By providing housing that is going to provide those mixed and balanced communities that we need to have, Bridge to Home hopes to do that. And as you mentioned, it's just one of many things that we're trying to do. In the midst of the last year that I've been mayor, and it's been a difficult time, we've been able to increase our shelter bed capacity in our city by 21%. And that's not been easy to do with the social distancing, with the Great Resignation that impacts not just retail clerks and restaurant workers. This is impacting our homeless services providers. To be able to make that kind of increase, I think indicates our city's commitment to working on this issue more thoughtfully, and gives me hope that once the challenges of this pandemic are fully behind us, that we can drive even more change that gets more people off the streets and gets us closer to what is our city's motto, which is America's finest city. I think that it's hard to claim that when you have 8,000 people who are unsheltered. We have to do better if we want to claim that greatness that I believe we can be. It just requires a lot more housing.
Well, and San Diego, like so many cities across the country and so many cities there in California, has been grappling with how to provide more housing units, more homes for people that need them in a very expensive housing market. Y'all have had state legislation, I know that you've been a part of and supported, that your predecessor, Senator Toni Atkins, she was in the state assembly before, and I know you succeeded her, was a leader on. But when y'all did your announcement on Bridge to Home, you announced that it would be 662 units. 193 of those units are reserved for people who are experiencing homelessness, and it's going to give them supportive services, these wraparound services that we've seen be so effective at stabilizing folks, and so that they can go get that GED or get the mental health care that they need, or generally physical care, or find a job. One of the things that caught my attention in the press conference that y'all did was that you announced 7 different sites in different parts of the city. But one of those sites is in San Bernardo. And
Rancho Bernardo.
What's that?
Rancho Bernardo.
Rancho Bernardo.
Yes.
Sorry. And you gave a little chuckle when you said that. You said, that's right, Rancho Bernardo.
Yeah.
Talk to me about why that's significant, that site there, and the fact that you have them in different places. You're going to have mixed income developments, but low income individuals in different neighborhoods of the city, not just in one.
I'm happy to expand on that, because I think it's an important part. And I sort of alluded to this already with balanced communities, right? Not just having complexes that are solely reserved for the very lowest of low income people, but balanced in terms of the mix within the building. But that also has to play out on the neighborhood level themselves. And I've said through the campaign and as mayor that we have to have, every neighborhood has to be a part of the solution. No one community is going to solve this problem. In the same way that I tell fellow mayors and state legislators and the governor, San Diego is not going to solve California's housing crisis. We all have to have everyone contributing to this solution. And it's a part of why I've been supportive of state housing reforms. It typically may be offensive to local elected officials, but we're trying to do everything we can down in San Diego to create more housing. I need every city to be in that fight, and state legislation typically results in that. With regard to your point, so Rancho Bernardo is a bedroom suburb of San Diego. It's part of our city. It's on the outer northern edge. It's a more affluent community. And growing up here, that was where the new homes, the new fancy homes were when I was a kid. They're a little older now, but it is not what you think of when you think about, subsidized or affordable or middle income housing. And it is important to me that we do this in every neighborhood. And so when we were able to work with a builder who can make a project in Rancho Bernardo work for this particular population, I think that's a good thing. I think it makes good on the promise of saying that everyone's going to be a part of the solution. And if I can say, we have a really strong inclusionary housing policy in San Diego. We've had it for some time. And in that neck of the woods, not that neighborhood, but nearby, there is a fair amount of subsidized housing. It's along with the 56 corridor, one of our freeways. The schools in the areas are amazing. And the kids who are a part of those inclusionary units who go to those schools, their lives are changed forever. You know, you break a generational cycle of poverty, and I've seen it. I've seen that play out. And when that chuckle or that excitement that you observed was really in the knowledge that we'd be adding to the number of families whose life circumstances will change. My life circumstances will change, right? I'm college educated. You know, my parents sacrificed everything, and that was in a time where, you know, it wasn't easy, but it was more doable. By creating opportunities like this, where more young people are going to have access to those incredible schools and kind of a bigger vision for themselves. Again, see it, you know, see it to be it. I'm just excited about that. And we're not done yet. You know, Bridge to Home, that's round one. We think we can promise to do at least maybe 2 more rounds, perhaps more. I'm really excited to show people that affordable housing actually can make your neighborhood better. You know, that we can use this as an opportunity to provide the amenities that some of these neighborhoods, including Rancho Bernardo, wants. And that when you see these folks up close, it isn't maybe who you've fear them to be, but they're just like you and I. I mean, frankly, in a city as expensive as San Diego, a lot of our grocery store workers and letter carriers and teachers can qualify for this housing. And the community's made better when the teacher actually shows up to work, not having to sit for an hour, hour and a half on the freeway to come to her classroom. She can actually live in the community that she teaches in. I think that's a good thing. And particularly if her child has that access to that high quality education, that's a good thing too.
Well, and you know, to touch on that part of it, and also the way that y'all have structured this Bridge to Home program, you know, our focus has been on connecting those dots. And so you talk about, for instance, housing opportunity, but then connecting that to better education because of where folks are able to live. The first project that you announced is, I think y'all are going to vote on one, but where you did the press conference was in, I think, San Isidro.
Yeah.
And you were very specific about mentioning that it's right by public transportation. It's across the street from a city park. It's near a healthcare facility. Talk to me about that part of it, you know, how y'all are breaking down those silos.
Yeah, and right next to a light rail station. And my communications director gets a gold star that day because the trolley went by just as I was delivering that line from the speech. So it doesn't get any better than that in terms of, you know, illustrating what we're trying to accomplish. And to your point, you know, housing, in my opinion, is the foundation from which all things grow, right? It's difficult to get a good education if you don't know where you're going to sleep at night. You know, maintaining your health. Housing is healthcare policy. Housing is climate policy. And so when you start with that base, you know, you've got a good chunk of the challenge addressed. But when you choose locations, whether it's in more resource-rich communities like Rancho Bernardo and the opportunities that come with that, or in San Isidro, which we are a proud border city here in San Diego, the largest in the United States. San Isidro is the last neighborhood before the U.S.-Mexican border. And there are placing that development in that community next to the light rail station, next to the healthcare clinic, near the park, you know, it just ends up addressing a lot of other concerns, and probably those things are really about the climate policy, right? You know, the fact that, you know, we are a Southern California city. I'd forgive you for thinking that we don't have mass transit or that's not a priority. No, it is. We're under federal, local, state and federal requirements to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions and our vehicle miles traveled. The only way we're going to accomplish that is if we're citing dense projects like the one that we were announcing that day in these context settings, right? Next to the major job centers that is the which is the neighborhood over. You know, you can see very quickly that example I gave you a moment ago, for everyone who can't find affordable housing, increasingly they're moving to adjacent counties and very long super commutes. Placing these families next to the station, next to these job centers, next to the border, they don't got to get in their car, right? And so there's just there's so many co-benefits that come from placing these things where they're at. Often these are difficult choices. Sometimes communities don't like this change, but as I mentioned before, I'm a passionate believer in that this will make the neighborhood better. And often people's objections are on the front end. On the back end, when you cut the ribbon, often the people who fought you are actually there celebrating what they see now as a fabulous community amenity that was added to the amenities that you mentioned previously.
And what is the timeline that y'all project for building out these 7 different developments?
A handful of years. The first of the projects, there's 7 projects in the Bridge to Home, was approved the next day by council. So that's good. The remainder of them will filter through the council through this calendar year. And most of this stuff takes, 18, 24 months to construct. Hopefully we'll be passing out keys at that San Ysidro site in 2024 or thereabouts. And it can't come a moment too soon. This I know is true across the nation, but here in San Diego, our Section 8 housing choice voucher waiting list is over 10 years.
Oh, I'm sure.
And, those folks who are on that waiting list, many of them can instead choose to live in some of these locations. Every month that passes is another rent check where, that family, that individual is sitting at the table wondering how they're going to write this check, how they're going to make sure it clears. That's a lot of checks between now and into 2024, or for the other projects that, may take a year or two longer than that. It just can't come fast enough. People struggle every single month. As I sit down and write my rent check at the first of the month, I'm grateful that I have a job with a great salary that allows me to do that with more ease than a lot of other people. But when I'm writing mine out, I think about the hundreds of thousands of families in my city who are either on that waiting list or who just, I remember what it was growing up and post-dating that check, right? Put it in the mail, not dropping it off at the landlord's house, right? All the tricks that you do to just try and make ends meet. My public service is about making more people successful and making ends meet, and hopefully doing it that they exceed that low bar and be able to have the opportunity to thrive.
One of your other priorities has been digital equity. Closing the digital divide there in San Diego. And you've had this initiative or program called Access for All. Talk to me about what y'all are trying to do to close that digital divide in a city that I'm sure runs the gamut, but includes many young people and low-income residents that still don't have broadband access at home.
Yeah. I appreciate the chance to talk about this because, obviously the internet and the opportunity to get online was important before the pandemic. It has been made clear how critical that is. It's, more like a public utility than it is, a luxury or an accessory in your life. But the reason I appreciate the question is that I think often when we discuss this issues of broadband and internet access, it is understandably focused on rural communities where it really is a challenge. And not to take away from that challenge, but I want to say very clearly, we have significant issues even in urban centers like ours, where folks aren't connected. And when students were shifted to virtual learning and you're talking about households that didn't have a computer, let alone internet access, you recognize pretty quickly how difficult that is. I imagine you got this when you were mayor too, and folks might say, folks who are not particularly knowledgeable or well-informed, why do we have libraries anymore? You don't need that any longer. And these are people who haven't been to a branch library recently to see there's a line out the door. And generally, not only do they want books, but they want access to computers. So full circle, being able to give folks the opportunity to access the internet from home or from their work is pretty critical. Access for all is about providing that public amenity and attaching it in a number of ways, whether it's the ability to check out laptops and hotspots from our public libraries, in addition to the banks of computers that are at the library, to a public Wi-Fi system concentrated in the communities where we know the digital divide is the greatest, to subsidizing some of those monthly services, working with our providers here, all of them are private companies, but leaning on them to participate, and they've been happy to do it, to make sure that even for those families that may have a computer, that they can actually have a subscription that they can afford. It's a comprehensive approach, and we think that we can, as we persist, and I'm working on my new city budget and persist and trying to maintain this funding or grow it so that we can knock out the remaining several thousand families that we know just don't have reliable access. As mayor, you can appreciate there are problems that you look at that are so enormous that you don't know how you're going to be able to tackle them successfully in their entirety. This is one of those because of we know who's connected and who's not. The number is large, but it's doable because of these public-private partnerships. My hope is that we can knock that down and make that far more successful. I mentioned before about the access to those quality schools. This is also determined about whether or not young people can be successful. Do they have the access, the ability to do their homework, to do their research, to do college applications? This is a part of why we're passionate about doing it and why the council has been great partners in actually choosing to fund this, as well as working with me with those private investors to actually get us the final distance, the full funding that we need to knock out all those homes that don't have that access.
I imagine your fiscal year starts on October 1.
July 1.
July 1.
Yeah.
All right, so even sooner.
Yes.
So y'all really are then probably right in the throes of your budget process right now.
Got my big binder right here.
You're giving me bad flashbacks. Yeah.
Some PTSD on that, right?
Yes.
My light reading at night.
But I mean, one of the things that we've seen in cities across the country has been this sort of reflection on the budget process. And a lot of cities have adopted either participatory budgeting or equity budgeting, where basically they try and reconfigure the distribution of resources in a more fair way. And a lot of the thrust is at trying to benefit the most vulnerable communities. I mean, whether y'all call it that or not, I mean, how have you seen the budgeting process, if at all, change in San Diego to try and address those needs?
A lot. When I was on the city council, I was the budget chair for 6 of the 8 years that I was here. And I'm not a big math guy, but I love budgeting. You recognize pretty quickly how powerful it is. And to your point, over the 2 decades that I've been associated with the city of San Diego, the participation levels are pretty astronomical. And it's not the participatory budgeting process that other cities have adopted, but in terms of, public participation, that we take the budget hearing out into the community. We have robust groups that really participate and help drive. And that's kind of how we've come on to the issue of equity, because that level of participation really laid bare the inequities in some of our funding strategies. And this was pre-pandemic. All of this has been exacerbated by it. I will tell you, I ran on a promise of bringing equity to the city of San Diego. Our first budget really lived that out. Again, deep appreciation to the city council who has supported this. And you can appreciate that, when you're talking about the inequitable distribution of public investment, there are districts that may have benefited from that inequity. And even those council members recognize that we have to be more balanced in our approach, and they've supported that, which is significant. How has that played out? It's been interesting. There's been some curious conversations as we change the culture here about that. So I've been asked the question, well, what's equity got to do with infrastructure? When talking about, doing infrastructure funding with an equity lens, like, what is that got to do with filling potholes? But so you folks would be interested to know, we have about 3,000 miles of roads in the city of San Diego. About 60 of them are unpaved. Believe it or not, 8th largest city in the country. We still have about 60 miles of roads that are unpaved.
So 60 out of 3,000 miles are still unpaved, basically.
Correct.
Yeah.
I'm going to let you guess where 2/3 of those unpaved roads are, which neighborhoods those are, what the residents there look like.
Probably San Isidro or some of the ones in that area,
right,
down near the border.
Right. And in our urban core, but those are the neighborhoods that are typically low income communities of color. And so when talking about road repair, and let me be very clear, I hate a pothole. I want to fill up anyone I see. I always told people, I have a bit of an OCD thing. So when I see potholes, I get the hyper responsibility kicks in. I want to fill them, right? I don't like them anywhere. But when you're talking about road repair, for some neighborhoods, you're talking about paving the road for the first time ever, as opposed to just pothole repair and maintenance. And so that conversation becomes very different. And then you overlay that into trash collection, streetlight repair, it's just, it does permeate the system. We have set up our Office of Race and Equity, first ever in the city's history. We also have a performance analytics office that is helping us really pull the data to show where those inequities are and try and recalibrate our spending and our prioritization. And it's very much a work in progress. But as I've mentioned, we have robust public participation. We have the support of the city council. And I think the other day we did this presentation on streetlight through an equity lens. The response was positive. And so I'm hopeful that this will be a part of a new culture here for our city. I know a lot of my fellow mayors across the country are following similar processes, and I think we'll be stronger cities as a result. I'm mayor to all 1.4 million people. And we have to make sure that all of those concerns are being addressed. And there are some folks that have a bit more time to participate in the process. There are other folks that need people like me to be looking out for them. That's what we're trying to do.
In just a moment, I'm going to turn over the program to Sophia and Olivia, our great student associates, and they're going to moderate just the last 20 minutes of student Q&A. I know we have some great questions. But before I turn it over to Sophia and Olivia, let me ask you, what's the best piece of advice that you've ever gotten and that you'd be willing to share with our students?
Well, I sort of got this a little bit going. Like, don't listen to that. We're our own worst enemies sometimes, and find a good mentor. Those were certainly secrets to my success. My mentor, Congresswoman Davis, said something to me that really stuck in terms of I think she meant it in terms of politics, but I think it's true in life generally, that you should listen more than you talk. And I'm not doing a great job of that today. This is not representative of that advice, but
well, you're here to talk. We want you to talk today.
That has, I think, allowed me to be more successful in this work than I would have appreciated when I received that advice, because particularly right now, I mean, people want to be heard. When we're talking about gas prices, they don't think I understand that they are what they're paying. Well, I pay it too, right? But what they want to do is be heard. And I worked for the county of San Diego years ago in social work. A lot of that skill set is applicable to the work I do now, right? Of people bringing their problems and really wanting someone to hear them and try and find solutions, connect them to resources, get problem solve. With all forgiveness, there's people often think that people in my kind of job should be an attorney, right? And those are valuable skill sets, but that's more about an argumentative approach. I think it's better to be solution oriented and again listening more than you talk. I think politics would be better if we had more people listening rather than talking over each other. And it's amazing what people will tell you. I mean, I'm blown away on a daily basis what folks share with me, and it helps me to prioritize. Right, it helps me to take the limited resources that I'm entrusted with and try and spend them as wisely as possible on the things that people care the most about. People are willing to share if you're only willing to listen, and a big part of my job is listening to as many people as possible and trying to find the common threads and work to move forward on those issues.
Well, thank you for that. And now I'll bring in Sophia and Olivia, our student associates, and I know that they've queued up some great questions. And I'm going to turn my screen off and let y'all take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
And I'll pop back in a little bit.
Wonderful. First, I wanted to say thank you so much for being here on behalf of the Sine Institute of Policy and Politics and the AU community. We're so honored to have you as a guest and talk more about economic mobility at the local level. So with that, if that's all right with you, I'm going to ask some questions from our Q&A. We have some really good ones in there.
Yeah,
wonderful.
Let's do it. Thanks, Sophia.
Absolutely. So first question is coming from Amy Dacey, also the director of the Sine Institute of Policy and Politics. And she's asking, is the polarization we see nationally in local communities as well? And if so, as mayor, how are you trying to tackle that to get things done in the San Diego community?
Well, it's less so at the local level, in part because you really do have a responsibility to deliver, right? You got to pick up the garbage every week, right? The water has to come out of the faucet. The toilet has to flush, right? So, that level of responsibility for delivering, I think, keeps some of that at bay. It is a troubling trend, though. The more politicized, really, all of this is. It was already high enough at the federal level. It's getting higher, and some of it permeates downward. To your question of how you overcome it, it's easy to find bipartisan consensus on things like infrastructure, as we've seen recently at the federal level, much to this mayor's delight. And thank you, President Biden, for that assist, because we're going to put that money to good use. But whether it's library hours, public safety, keeping our beaches clean. I mean, these are things for which there's not necessarily the partisan divide that you see at state and federal levels. That's frankly, back to the secretary's, one of his first questions, it's part of what I prefer about local government too. It's not I'm a proud Democrat, I'm a proud progressive Democrat, and I bring those values to the table. But those values also mean that I got to find compromise and forward progress. And I just find that's far easier at the local level, in part because it's not as divided as it is at the state and national level.
Absolutely, thank you. In a similar vein, Tyler Elliott asks, do you see mayors or local city officials as being the politicians to get the most done for their communities, more so than potentially state legislators or senators and representatives at the federal level? And he also says that he watches C-SPAN for hours voluntarily as well.
Oh gosh, well, Tyler, good luck to you. It's a word of warning, what could happen to you if you keep watching it. Nothing wrong with that. You were probably teased like I was, but it all works out in the end. To the question, I think the short answer is yes, but I think that is unfair in some ways to state and federal folks who do a lot of work. I mean, but let's be honest. I mean, if you're running the federal government, that's a massive enterprise with an enormous budget, a lot of employees, and they do a lot of work. I was on a plane last night. I'm grateful for the FAA, right? The work that they do to make sure that we can do that safely. And that's just one of thousands of things the federal government does. As a former state legislator, I often feel like they're the Jan Brady of politics, right? It's that reference may be dated for some of the young people here. The Brady Bunch, right? The middle child. People overlook low state government. But California is the fifth largest economy in the world, right? And whether it's our cap and trade program around climate action, there's so many things that the state is doing, is churning out. I think why the answer is still yes, though, is that, as I mentioned in the previous question, we just have a responsibility to deliver, right? And so, the legislative session goes on for months and whatever, and it's a long, lengthy process. And sometimes you'll hear about, like this morning, I woke up about the daylight savings time being passed by the Senate, having to remind everybody, civics class, that ain't the end of the line, right? The House has to vote on it. The president has to sign it. You're still a long way from. I have a weekly measuring stick. Did my garbage get picked up or did it not? And in the process, I get judged in that. Also, the inverse is also true. Is that pothole still out there? Has that not gotten resolved yet? Point is, it's just such an intimate level of government. The spotlight and the proximity is so obvious that I think you end up getting both more of the blame and the credit. But I don't want to dismiss what happens at the state and federal level. It's really important. And as I mentioned before, as someone who feels himself a missionary for public service, I think attempts to diminish which is not what I think Tyler was doing, but sometimes it plays into a frame of diminishing that work, which is very noble, very valuable. Quite honestly, I couldn't do a lot of what I do as a mayor without strong state and federal partners.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Mayor. Next question is from Nicholas Hudson. He is a AU student in the School of International Service based in Washington, D.C., and he's also a native Californian. He asks, San Diego has been the most successful large city in California to tackle the homelessness crisis. What are some initiatives that San Diego has implemented that the state of California can pursue to solve this issue? And in addition, San Diego has Vladivostok, Russia as a sister city. And in light of the current events in Ukraine, will this relationship be dissolved? And I apologize if I butchered the name of that city.
Oh, no, you did good. You did good.
Thank you.
Lot in there, Nicholas. Let's see. With regard to homelessness, I appreciate you saying that often, because some days it doesn't feel that way, right? I mean, when I see encampments, you just want to solve the problem as quickly as you can. As I mentioned before, it's such a complex issue, and it often involves having to continually go to the individual and make contact and try and get their trust in order to accept services. To your question about what are we doing at the local level that can be pushed up to the state, I will tell you, and kind of going back to the previous question, Governor Newsom was here recently to highlight something that we're doing and to really recommend that other cities follow our lead. So the state of California appropriated a large amount of money under a Clean California campaign to clean up our highways, in part because there's a lot of litter, but there's also increasingly a large number of people living along the freeways. Doing that program is funded for cleanliness purposes, right? It's picking up garbage. But again, acknowledging that many people are living along our freeways, to simply go out there and collect the garbage would be to leave a large part of the problem still there. So what I used some of our relief funds, again, thank you, Joe Biden, to hire street outreach workers so that when Caltrans workers go out to clean, we send, and this group is called CityNet, to go with them so that while we're doing the cleanups, we can engage the individuals. Hey, what's the cause of your homelessness? Would you be interested in a shelter bed? Are you signed up for benefits? To do that work. Absent that combination, that sort of tearing down of silos between the state and local government, between homeless services and Caltrans, that work wouldn't be happening. And I think all of us could agree that simply moving someone from one freeway off ramp to the next one is not solving the problem. Governor saw this approach that we're taking and came down to help shine a light on it because other cities can replicate it, and I hope that they will. We've been able to get a fair number of folks into shelter. We have so many more that we need to do. It is not mission accomplished at all. But I think that is an example of what we have to do. That repeated outreach work, or making that contact day after day, building trust, building rapport, gets those folks who choose to be homeless, and it builds the opportunity and the trust to get them into shelter, which is the first step on the way to housing and hopefully back to stability and independence. That's something that we're doing, but we have other things we're doing in terms of housing production that I think are worthy of state. In fact, we have a housing density law that was created in the city of San Diego and was just replicated at the state level. So I think we are leading on this, but we still have so much further to go. On the last bit about the sister city relationship, that hasn't been asked of me. Quite honestly, Nicholas, we haven't done nearly anything on our sister city relationships, which is actually a bit of a frustration. A lot of these agreements were signed back in the 70s, and they haven't been maintained the way that I'd like to. Had the opportunity to go to Glasgow, Scotland, I think the first time a mayor has visited one of our sister cities in quite some time. And I'm hoping to reinvigorate some of these relationships. That said, with regard to what's going on in Ukraine, it's a very tragic situation. You may know that many of Ukrainian refugees are ending up at our port of entry in San Ysidro, the neighborhood Secretary Castro was talking about a moment ago. We have a Welcoming San Diego initiative. We're prepared to resettle these individuals the same way that we were resettling children from Central America and Mexico last year, the way we've been resettling folks from Afghanistan in recent months. We stand ready to accommodate folks, and we stand with Ukraine. And we'll continue to do whatever we can to speak out against the violence that is being perpetrated on them by Russia.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Mayor. I have a couple of additional questions for you from our Q&A. The first one is from Nick White, a student in the School of Public Affairs. And Nick is asking, do you think that affordable housing projects in local communities are hampered by developers through political donations and the hijacking of town halls and other democratized systems?
Okay, and Sophia, so sorry, could you repeat that?
Absolutely. Hopefully you can still hear me and I'm coming through clearly.
So I've lost Sophia, but I can read it on the screen. So
I can read it to you, Mayor. I'm here. Okay. I'm the other fellow. No worries. But Nick White asked, do you think that affordable housing projects in local communities are hampered by developers through political donations and the hijacking of town halls and other democratized systems?
Okay, so I heard it right the first time. I was just kind of confused. I haven't heard it posed that way. I think affordable housing, they're built by developers, right? That's how they're constructed. We have, as I mentioned before, a strong inclusionary housing law here in San Diego. So I don't see that as being the challenge. I think the issue is more about the fear of change and the fear of the unknown, the fear of the other. In my time as a city council member, as state legislator, and as mayor, often when people hear that this is coming, and it doesn't have to be affordable housing, just be new housing, period. Folks sort of default to the belief that that's going to make their neighborhood worse. If you're familiar with San Diego, neighborhoods like Little Italy and North Park are areas where we've seen a tremendous amount of growth. And I think people would say that those are some of the most vibrant and exciting neighborhoods in the city. I just try and remind folks that, I believe that this can help our communities. If you understand that developers have to pay impact fees, those fees go to fund infrastructure in our city. You recognize pretty quickly that the ability to build new parks, build new libraries, fire stations, or enhance existing ones come from that development that is paid, those fees that are paid for by developers, I think we can address many of the multitude of concerns that are out there by simply explaining to people that this does not necessarily have to make your neighborhood, it will not hurt your neighborhood. In fact, it can make it better. And the way I choose to engage in that is really ask people, what is the true concern? What is the issue? Is it placement, location, design? Happy to work with folks to try and address those concerns. But at the bottom line is we have to build more housing. We just simply aren't building enough, really at all price points, but particularly for the working and middle class of our city. Inclusionary housing policy and other pro-housing policies that we have for low-income folks means that we actually do build quite a bit of low-income housing, not nearly enough, but way more than the amount of housing that we need for folks who earn too much to qualify for those low-income programs, but don't earn enough to be able to afford to live in some of the luxury stuff that gets built really easily. That's why we have to build more housing generally.
Thank you for that. We have one more question and then we can wrap up the Q&A portion. The question is from Shelby Patterson, who is a graduate student at the School of Public Affairs. They are asking, in the same vein of eliminating silos and collaborating to boost economic mobility for the public good, how is the San Diego government incorporating women, BIPOC, and locally owned businesses in its development plans?
A great question. So we're actually in the midst of updating our city's economic development strategy, first time in quite some time. And going back to the conversation with Secretary Castro, by having a more participatory process, by centering equity in that conversation, I believe we're going to get a very different economic development plan. And you can see some of the signs of life in what we've been doing in terms of recovery efforts. We established a small business relief program here at the city. And we were very intentional in investing in BIPOC communities, in communities of concern, in environmental justice and in empowerment communities. I think that has been very, very successful in terms of being able to reach communities that typically get overlooked. I think that was very much an economic development program that was reimagined to be way more inclusive. And the results that we're seeing in terms of the 1,500 plus businesses that we've invested in, you see a substantial representation of women-owned, Black-owned, Latino-owned, immigrant-owned businesses. I'm really excited about that because, again, I think that if you're considering equity, you know where you need to invest. With regard to the question about women, I'm in the process of reestablishing our Commission on the Status of Women here at the city. That went defunct a while ago. We can do better. We need to do better. But the economic development strategy, that's a timely question because we're in the midst of updating it, and encourage you to maybe participate in the process. We have a lot of new initiatives underway. Nothing like a new administration, right? Full of new ideas in 8 years to get it done. To really invite public participation to build again that culture change that I was talking about a moment ago. It's a different administration, it's different mayor, it's different council, and we want our policies to be updated not only to reflect our priorities, but that of a changing city. When this San Diego was a big city when I was a kid, but it was about 500,000 people. As we mentioned before, we're knocking on 1.5 million before too much longer, and we need to update our plans to reflect the population that we're serving today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your time in these questions.
My pleasure, Olivia, and thank you, Sophia.
A huge thank you to Sophia and Olivia, two of our student associates, for moderating the Q&A, and to all of our student associates, and to Amy Dacey, who heads the Sine Institute, and most especially, Mayor, thank you for being so generous with your time today, and most importantly, thank you for your leadership on all of the issues that we touched on today, and especially your leadership on addressing the needs of the most vulnerable residents of San Diego. We look forward to getting out there to San Diego one of these days again soon. And it's a wonderful place. And I know that under your leadership, it's going to be even better.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. You're always welcome. All of you are always welcome. We're a proud tourist town. We like to welcome people here. It's in our DNA. So come anytime. And thank you so much for this opportunity. And to all the folks who tuned in, please, I know you're probably already in the tank, but if you're not fully confirmed public servants, please know, you can spend the rest of your career getting up every day just to make your city, your state, your country a better place to live. I can't think of a better way to spend a career. I hope you'll choose to do that.
Wonderful. And I hope folks will stay tuned for the next session that we're going to have on March 30th and more details to come. Thanks a lot, Mayor.
Thank you.
Take care.